Iran closes airspace as it prepares for extensive missile drills amid rising tensions, in a significant development that underscores escalating military activity in the Middle East. Iran has shut down parts of its airspace ahead of planned extensive missile launches, prompting international aviation warnings and drawing close attention from global powers. According to the report, Iran issued a formal notice to pilots instructing them to avoid broad sections of Iranian airspace during the period of scheduled missile activity. The closure is part of what Tehran describes as a series of large-scale military exercises, but outside observers are watching closely to determine whether the drills could signal a shift toward a more aggressive posture in the region. What the airspace closure means: the airspace restrictions were announced through a Notice to Air Missions, which temporarily prohibits civilian aircraft from flying in designated sectors during the drill timeframe. Data from the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration shows that the restricted periods are in effect for several hours, suggesting that missile activity could occur over southern Iran and nearby strategic areas, such as the critical Strait of Hormuz, a key route for global energy shipments. Deadly crackdown in Iran. What happened at the protests? Nationwide protests that erupted in Iran on December 28, 2025 have been met with a brutal and deadly response by the authorities, according to Amnesty International. The demonstrations began after a sharp collapse in the Iranian currency sparked widespread anger over worsening living conditions and economic hardships, leading people to demand fundamental change and respect for human rights. What started with strikes by shopkeepers in Tehran's Grand Bazaar quickly spread across cities and provinces throughout the country. Demonstrators called for an end to the Islamic Republic system and reforms to address long-standing grievances. Unlawful force and mass killings. Iranian security forces, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps IRGC, Basij militias, regular police units, Fair-e-Jav, and plain-clothes agents, responded with lethal force. Verified videos and eyewitness accounts gathered by Amnesty International show that law enforcement repeatedly fired rifles and shotguns loaded with metal pellets at protesters, frequently striking them in the head and torso. The most intense repression occurred on January 8 and 9, 2026, when death tolls surged into the thousands, making this period the deadliest crackdown on dissent documented by Amnesty in decades. Internet blackout and information suppression. On January 8, Iranian authorities imposed a total internet shutdown, cutting off communication across the country. Amnesty International condemned this move as a deliberate attempt to conceal human rights violations and prevent information about killings, arrests, and other abuses from reaching the outside world. Mass arrests and human rights abuses. The crackdown has also involved widespread arbitrary arrests, including of children as young as 14, and reports of enforced disappearances, torture, and incommunicado detention. Many detained protesters have been denied access to lawyers or contact with their families, placing them at high risk of further abuse. Calls for international action. Amnesty International has urged the international community to take urgent diplomatic action to stop the escalation of violence and to hold Iranian authorities accountable for potential crimes under international law. Despite the suppression and information blackout, the protests and the government's violent response have drawn global attention to the deep discontent within Iran and the serious human rights concerns raised by the ongoing crisis.
بیا کنار دیوار.
همینجوری دارم میزنم مردم.
دیجای فردیس سان نوشا مردم رو کشتن، مردم رو تو کشتن، با تیر جنگی زدن، دختر مردم مرده اینجا.
Almost all U.S. E-3A-BLS deployment signals Iran strike prep. Former USMC captain, the likelihood of Trump not making a decision to strike Iran is getting smaller and smaller. Former U.S. Marine Corps captain and ex-State Department official Matthew Ho speculates on X. The fact that the U.S. Air Force has sent 6 of its total 16 E-3 Sentry airborne warning and control system, AWACS, radar planes to bases in Europe and to the Middle East, as reported by the War Zone, is the strongest indication of the seriousness of the U.S. threat to Iran, he notes.